Hi and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a spooky inspiration dice holder. If you take a look over here, I'm going to show you how this scary fellow is made step by step. So stay tuned and let's get started. For this video, I'm using the brand new GoPro, so things are gonna get a little fancy for this one. I found this great bag of skulls at Walmart. I have also seen them at Michael's and Joann's, but basically you want to use the bigger skull from this pack. And yeah, I can't help but play around with it like it's kind of like Pac-Man here. It's just, I don't know what it is. But what we're going to do is we're going to detach the bottom jaw from the upper portion of the skull, and we're going to follow along where you have the jawline and into the mouth itself. To remove the jaw, these are the tools you're going to need. A sharp pair of kitchen shears. Please do not have these be the shears you actually use in your kitchen. A pair of nippers, a hobby hand drill, as well as this mold line stripper from Citadel. You're first going to start with a hobby hand drill, and you're going to start boring holes next to each other along the jaw line. You don't want this to go directly into the jaw, but use this space around it, which you can see right here. So what you do is you're going to take this drill and you're going to work these holes all around the back and bottom part of the jaw. And you want to get the holes as close to each other as possible. The next thing you're going to do is take those strong pair of nippers, and you're going to basically crack into that space between the upper jaw and the lower jaw to cut between the two to free them from each other. Now you're going to move on to taking your kitchen shears, and you're going to nip away the excess plastic between the holes. It's definitely good to make sure you have a good grip on this and take it 2 holes at a time. So one that you've just cut, move over to the next one. And it actually is a very quick process once you get the hang of it. And again, it helps if your holes are a little bit closer to each other to do this. Now, if you have a Dremel, you could definitely use your Dremel to do this as well. I'm using tools that I had on hand and are a little bit more available for everyone. Once you've made your way all around, you should be able to free the upper jaw from the lower jaw and have 2 separate pieces. And yes, you can play around a little bit and have it bite and chomp its way around. Now we need to remove this excess bits of plastic, and to do this I first started with the Citadel mold stripper. This is a very handy tool, especially if you paint a lot of minis. It has this curved edge that helps strip away plastic mold lines, and so I'm going to use this just to get away the larger pieces that were around the skull. I also went back in with the nippers to cut away some of the large pieces of plastic that really just didn't need to be there. You can even trim away more with the kitchen shears. Those are also quite effective. And once you have the bigger chunks all taken away and removed, you can go in with a metal nail file and smooth out the edges even further. For the base, you're going to need a piece of chipboard. I went about 2.5 by 2.5 here, as well as the E6000 so that you can attach the jaw as well as the skull to the chipboard. For placement, you're going to want to trace around the jaw with a mechanical pencil, just so you know where you want your jaw placement to be. It helps to put it a little bit more forward on the piece of chipboard. Moving on to the E6000, you want to put a nice big glob into where you have your traced form of the jaw. So squeeze that out, get that in there. Again, make it a good size because there is a hollow part to the jaw that you want to make sure you're catching in the process. And once you get it on there, you can then place the jaw piece on top of where you put that nice big glob of E6000. Taking a D20, you're going to place the skull over the jaw and make sure the mouth is wide enough to hold the dice, and then mark on the back of the skull where the jaw meets up. This will act as a good gauge as to where you need to place your skull. Once you have that done, you're going to put a dollop of E6000 on the back portion of the skull and place it onto the chipboard as well. It will help to prop the skull up to make sure it doesn't flop back over. You can even take a piece of tissue to put into the front portion of the mouth and then put something behind it. I used my E6000 tube in this case to hold the skull from falling all the way back. It also helps to do one more test fit. For the stone spikes around the skull, you can use a chunk of insulation foam. You're going to want to make sure you have a nice sharp utility knife on hand as well as a low temp hot glue gun. Cutting triangular chunks off the foam is going to be your first step here. It helps take some shallow cuts before cutting all the way through. Then what you're going to do is start beveling off the edges of these triangular chunks, and you want to try and form a point at the top and a wider base at the bottom. And this is going to help you form those spike shapes. When you're done, you should have this conical-like shape. So again, there's a point at the top and a wider base at the bottom. Using a wire brush, we're going to give the stones a porous look to them by basically taking the brush and smashing it into the foam. Using the glue gun, what you want to do now is fill in any gaps around the open area of the skull, especially in the mouth portion. And you also want to run some hot glue around the back of the skull and under the jaw to secure the two together a little bit more. It actually helps to do a few passes in that gap in the open mouth portion to put in some hot glue, let it cool, and then put in a little bit more to fill in that space. After you've done so, this should now have it so that the open mouth of this skull acts as one piece as opposed to two separate pieces when it's wide open. Now that you've put the hot glue around and in the skull, what you can do is start adding on your rock spikes. And for this, it just depends on how you want to balance it out. However many you've made, you can use that, or you can make one, put it on, make one, put it on. That approach is completely up to you, but you want to make sure you have it sort of look like the skull has been placed amongst the spikes. Using your hot glue gun and some fish tank gravel, you can put the hot glue in the spaces between these spikes and put the gravel on top, and make sure you press down a little bit so that it adheres to the hot glue. And this is going to add some texture to the base of the skull. Now, you're not going to cover the entire base with this, just in those areas where there are gaps between the spikes. Essentially, you want it to end up looking like this. For the front portion of the base and around the edges, I decided to use the Vallejo Earth Texture acrylic. This is actually a great combination. It works very much as if you were to put white glue onto the base and then put sand on top, but it turns it into one fell swoop. So I really do like using this paint. You can see here how the texture is really brought out, especially if you dab the paintbrush up and down a little bit to give a little bit of a peaked look to the surface as well. To get it all ready for painting, you are going to want to do a base coat of 2 parts black to 1 part Mod Podge, and then you're going to do a thin coat over everything, including the skull. For the heavier handed dry brushing, these are the colors we're going to be using. We're going to start with Coffee Latte, move on to Golden Sunset, and finish up with Antique White. Using a wide flat brush, you're going to first start with a Coffee Latte, and you're going to do a dry brushing with about 70% coverage on the skull, if not about 80%. You want this to be mostly covered, but you do want some of the darker tones of the base coat to come through. When you finish doing that, move on to the Golden Sunset, scale it back a little bit, do about 50% coverage with the dry brushing technique to cover the skull, and only the skull. It's okay if some of the paint gets onto the stones, it will get covered up, but right now the paint needs to get on the skull. When that has dried, finish up with the Vanilla Ice Cream, and this time keep it about a 30% coverage, again with a dry brush technique. Using a flat black, what you're going to do is go back in and you're going to paint in the sockets of the eyes as well as the open mouth to give it a flat black finish, and make sure you put a healthy coat inside the mouth itself. For the stone spikes, we're going to dry brush using these colors, starting with Graphite, moving on to Sunkissed Peach, and finishing up with Granite Gray. The approach is going to be very similar to what we just did with the skull, except we're focusing on the spikes and the base. So you're going to start with your Graphite Gray, again dry brush this on, and keep it at about 70% coverage. Give it a little time to dry, move on to your Sunkissed Peach, dry brush, giving this about a 40% coverage. When that has dried, move on to Granite Gray, and this go around, it's about a 20% coverage. You're highlighting those higher areas of the spikes as well as the texture of the base. We're going to be using 2 washes for this from Citadel, the Agrax Earth Shade and the Nuln Oil. So the Agrax is going to go onto the skull and the base of this where we had put the Vallejo texture paint. Then the Nuln Oil is going to go onto the rock spikes as well as the texture of the gravel. Once the washes are totally dry, you're going to go back in with this parchment paint, and you're actually going to do a very, very light dry brushing on everything. This means the skull as well as the rocks as well as the base. Now that that's all done, let's take a look at how this comes out. This is one of those pieces that has that fun, spooky, creepy factor to it, and if you're doing a Halloween-like themed game, or even just one of those thriller-type games, this inspiration dice holder is going to be a great addition to your tabletop accessories. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask them of me. You can comment down below, or you can email me at thecraftingmuse.email@gmail.com. I hope this is a project you'd like to take on. If you do, I'd always love to get a picture of it as well. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you've liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And as always, feel free to subscribe while you're here. Take care, everyone. Oh, I recorded with a wrong microphone. And yes, there is such a thing as the wrong microphone, which sounded like tin can.
Oompa chompas! Ho, ho, ho. Here, get a dice in your mouth, chomp. Ha, 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 ha. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, 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 oh. Don't ask. Just don't even ask. Hello, hello. Oh, hello! It's almost Halloween! Can't wait. It's like Pac-Man. Look, you ought to be in pictures. You big galoot. You gonna look at yourself in the camera? You're a handsome boy. Yes, you are. A very handsome boy. Hi. You gonna give me happy feet? Happy feet. Hi. Hi. What's she doing? You bugging me this morning? You wanna hang out? You don't want me to film? Hello.
Hi and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a... Oh, she's got her hands going. The Italian's kicking in. The Italian's kicking in.